Item 1, apologies for absence, please, Mr Town Clerk.
We have an apology, Madam Mayor, from Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. I think everybody else is here, so thank you very much to everybody for attending.
I was speaking to Councillor James Bettigue, who was hoping to come tonight from Tavistock south east. He can't make it because he's on night duty, so he sends his apologies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, we move on then to item 2, declarations of interest, to receive disclosures of unregistered or other interest from councillors on matters to be considered at the meeting. So basically, if you have an interest, you should declare it as soon as you, either now or as soon as you become aware of it during the meeting, please. Right, thank you. Item 3, minutes of council meeting, to confirm the minutes of the meeting of Tavistock Town Council, which was held on Tuesday the 28th of May. It is enclosed with your papers that you've received this evening. First of all, can we have confirmation that it is a true record of the meeting that took place? Thank you, Councillor. Mrs Ewing. We have somebody to second those, please. Thank you. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Just sign it now. Shall I sign it? Or later? Okay. Right, thank you. Any matters arising from those minutes, please? Councillor Smith.
Yes, Madam Mayor. It's not specified in the minutes, but it is to do with the action that took place at this particular meeting. Sadly, some people might say I did watch the recording of the meeting, and I noted that there were points raised about members who weren't present at that meeting. And I want to start off by saying I agree with the response given by the Town Clerk, and would emphasise myself that with modern day criminals and communications, it is suffice to record apologies on the night. I would, however, now, it's a few weeks on, like to thank the previous council for nominating me to attend the garden party at Buckingham Palace when the meeting was going on. It was indeed an honour to be present at such an occasion, which was thoroughly enjoyed by both my wife and myself. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Any other matters arising, please? Okay, then we'll move on to item 4, public representations and questions. I understand that we have had none. Is that correct? Right, thank you. Items requiring a decision. 5, annual governance statement. To discharge the obligations of the authority to approve the annual governance statement and review the effectiveness of the system of internal control for Tavistock Town Council for the year ended 31st of March 2019. A copy is enclosed. Mr Town Clerk, would you like to speak to this, please?
Thank you. You've already had a presentation from the internal auditor of the council, and you had circulated at where you're sitting on the table the comments of the internal auditor in relation to the statutory questions, and he has indicated that he feels that the levels of assurance and control are satisfactory in relation to the operation of the council over the past year. Additionally, you've had reporting to you on a periodic basis at each council meeting in terms of the payments, in terms of your budget, and in terms of any interim audit reports which have taken place, and none of those have raised any significant issues. On that basis, if there are there any questions, first of all, in relation to the internal auditor's report, which didn't arise when he made comment earlier? And if not, if you can turn to page 4, which is headed up section 1, annual governance statement 2018-19, the internal auditor having now done his job, this is the opportunity for the council to review each of the statements 1 to 8 on that page, and to express a view as to whether or not effectively it concurs with the internal auditor. Madam Mayor.
On the copy that I've got, it's on page 5.
It is on the copy you've got, but sorry, I think
this was a different
if you are Sorry, there was some confusion first time round, which was kindly pointed out to me by Councillor Mrs Parker, which was the copy which originally went with your agendas was actually one for smaller authorities than ours. We therefore circulated by email to you the amended and corrected copy. So my apologies to those of you who still have the copy which was circulated with the agenda. But the questions are going to be consistent with that. So if you are happy for me to, Councillor
Parker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's on the question of parts 2 and part 3. I know this is relevant to item 6, but the auditors report, the accounts, say that we should be on the part 4. Can we clarify? Are we 2, 3 or 4, please?
We are required to confirm the annual governance statement before we confirm the financial statements. And the reason for that is that if you were to find that you did not feel that there were appropriate measures of control or assurance in place, then that would call into question the financial statements which are actually included at item 6. Because otherwise, if you were to agree your financial statements and then say, but we had a major issue with one or other of the levels of assurance and control, then clearly that undermines your view in relation to the financial statements. So the answer to your question is, you come to section 2, the accounting statements for Tavistock Town Council, which has been pre-populated, after you've done the annual governance statement, and we are required to do it in that order by the audit process.
Councillor Parker, do you wish to come back?
Yes, please. I think the point has been missed, that the part 2 was corrected by the submission of the part 3 paper, but the accounts say that as applied to local councils by part 4 of the governance and accountability for local councils. I'm just seeking clarification as to, have we got the right papers still?
Yeah, sorry. You are looking... sorry, I've just clocked what it is you're looking at. You are looking at what has been prepared by our accountant,
yes,
which are the unaudited financial statements prepared by the accountant. The paper that, when we get to item 6, you will look at first is this one, which has been pre-populated. Please, at this stage, disregard what your accountant has prepared. It will be the one which forms part of the annual return, it's part of the annual governance statement. That document does not form part of what is the return to the external auditor.
So we're looking at part 3.
If you look at what you've got, what we're looking at is what is headed up, section 1, annual governance statement.
Yeah. Councillor Mrs Mann? No? Okay. Right. Town Clerk, please, yeah.
So section 1 of the annual governance statement, the questions are, and I will read them, but in the event that you have an issue with one of those, please can you indicate. The first one is that as a council we've put in place arrangements for effective financial management during the year and the preparation of the accounting statements, and you'll see what that means if you look at the right hand column. Second, that we have maintained an adequate system of internal control, including measures designed to prevent and detect fraud and corruption, and reviewed its effectiveness. The third is that we took all reasonable steps to assure ourselves that there are no matters of actual or potential non-compliance with laws, regulations and proper practices that could have a significant financial effect on the ability of the authority to conduct its business or manage its finances. Fourth, we provided proper opportunity during the year for the exercise of electors' rights in accordance with the requirements of the accounts and audit regulations. Fifth, we carried out an assessment of the risks facing the authority and took appropriate steps to manage those risks, including the introduction of internal controls and or external insurance cover where required. Sixth, we maintained throughout the year an adequate and effective system of internal audit of the accounting records and control systems. Seventh, we took appropriate action on all matters raised in reports from internal and external audit. And eighth, we considered whether any litigation, liabilities or commitments, events or transactions occurring either during or after the year end have a financial impact on the authority and where appropriate have included them in the accounting statements. Item 9 is not applicable for this authority. The question is, are you comfortable to answer those questions in the affirmative following the conversation you've had with the auditor, please?
Councillor Mrs Ewing. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Right, so it's number 6. 6, accounting statements. To consider and approve the statement of accounts of the authority and annual return of Tavistock Town Council for the year ending the 31st of March 2019 enclosed. Mr Town Clerk.
Thank you very much. And this is section 2, which is the pre-populated section that you have had circulated to you. And this forms the second part of your annual return. This is to receive and to endorse for submission to the external auditor. The second document that you've got there, which is the one that Councillor Mr Parker was referring to in terms of the unaudited financial statements, is what has been prepared by your accountant, and he will be in attendance to answer any detailed questions on and around those at your July meeting.
Right, does anybody have any comments or questions to make? Councillor Williamson, please.
If I may, I noticed in the accounts that the last revaluation, this is on page 15, fixed asset valuation, was 10 years ago, not long after the big crash. And of course we've had some kind of bounce back, I believe. Looking at house prices in Tavistock, I think it's quite significant. I just wondered when the next revaluation might be done. I also realise, of course, these things have a significant cost to get chartered surveyors to do it, and whether it's wise to incur that cost is a judgment that might need to be taken as well.
Mr Town Clerk.
This is one of those procedural niceties. That was the last date at which we were required to have a re-evaluation done, and therefore that is the date which is listed. We have had a valuation done since, but because this relates to when it is required to be done, it is the historic date as at the last time of the requirement.
Thank you.
If I may just ask when the last revaluation was actually done, just for general information. If it wasn't 2009, when was it?
For insurance purposes, the last one was 2 months ago, but we need to distinguish between valuations for insurance purposes and valuations to assess the value of buildings.
Right, so we've had the statement of accounts presented. Questions? I've actually emailed Mr Kemp with a couple of queries. I've got nothing that's material, but just some clarification. He's coming to our next meeting in July. Can we please have a proposer that these accounts are adopted? Councillor Parker.
Thank you. I just have a question. If we do have questions of substance about the statement of accounts and we approve them tonight, then what questions can we legitimately ask the accountant next time?
I think if we can distinguish between effectively the document which you need to consider in relation, so this is not what the accountant submitted, this document which is in connection with submitting a valid submission to the external auditor. So this is the financial statement which you are endorsing for submission. In the context of what you have got from your accountant, I would suggest that you are receiving that document, and then that is not an endorsement of it, but you are receiving that because that is not a statutory document. It is the other document which is the statutory submission that you need to make. And that then enables you, should you wish to do so, to raise any points of detail in connection with it when he arrives.
Madam Mayor, that's helpful. It's just that on the agenda it says to consider and approve the statement of accounts. If we're just receiving them, then I understand.
Okay. Are you happy then to approve these accounts, which will then be submitted to the external auditor?
Yeah. The external. That one.
Yeah.
I'm happy to follow.
Thank you. Thank you. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Thank you. That's carried. Thank you. Right, we move on then to item 7, which is general finance, schedules of payments. To consider and endorse the monthly accounts as at the 30th of April. I was very pleased to see that there were a number of emails that came in to the town clerk, which I think have all been fully and satisfactorily answered. So thank you to those people who've emailed them in. I always find you get a very good and prompt response, so thank you. So are you happy that we approve those, the schedule of payments? Councillor Mrs Ewing, thank you. Thank you. Okay, moving on then to the budget monitoring report. To consider and endorse the phased budget monitoring report as at the 30th of April. Only just the start of the year, so if anybody ever has any questions on these, please, even if it's after the meeting, do submit them to the office, because it's important that you understand it. And I think we're having a finance training session prior to the next council meeting, so hopefully it will all become crystal clear then. Okay, Councillor Parker.
Thank you. It's just a quick one, Madam Mayor. Can you just say where can I find the budget for the operation of the public toilets? I've tried, but I can't find it.
Town clerk.
The answer is there currently isn't one. That's the budget will be set as part of the budget setting round this autumn, and that will be one of the things which the Budget and Policy Committee will be reviewing to make a recommendation to Council. If my memory serves me right, and I'll need to do a double check, I think our estimate is that we are looking at an additional something like £60,000 to operate the 2 public conveniences which the Town Council has indicated it's prepared to take over. That is broadly equivalent to 10% of precept.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, so any other questions on the budget monitoring report? No, then we'll move on to the item C, the internal audit report. To consider and endorse the internal audit report enclosed, which I think everybody's had a copy with. I wasn't altogether convinced by the colour coding of this. Somebody seems to have got the wrong colours on the, either they've got the wrong priority or the wrong colours, which we need some clarification on, please, Mr Town Clerk.
The internal auditor did indicate that he is going to go back to that because there's an auto colouring process which clearly hasn't quite worked in the way it was expected to.
Right, okay. I think some questions have been raised prior to the meeting. Councillor Mrs Ewing? Yeah? Councillor Mrs Parker?
Yes, the auditor...
Could you stand, please?
Sorry. The auditor said that he needed to amend the annual audit report return to put the other date on it, because otherwise it doesn't tally with the internal audit report that we're looking at. So do we need to wait until he corrects that form before we endorse the internal audit report?
No, because what he did was at the end of the training session, he produced an amended copy of that and gave it to me, and that's what will be sent to the external auditor.
Thank you. Any other questions? Everybody happy with that then? Okay, right, thank you. Item D, tender. To authorise the opening of tenders in connection with the Guildhall Gateway Centre project by the responsible financial officer in consultation with the Mayor and associated diligence. Mr Town Clerk?
Thank you. This was put on as a precautionary measure. Between the time of publishing the agenda, I did have an opportunity to speak to the internal audit because I just wanted to double check whether or not, because of the potential size of tenders for the Gateway Centre, that was necessary. He has subsequently advised that we do not require authority for that, so we will proceed and undertake the necessary due diligence, so no authority is required in relation to that. And the second item, really, my apologies for the typo, is just to indicate that we may well need to have a special meeting of Council when we've undertaken the due diligence on tenders, depending on where that falls within the committee cycle to consider that matter.
Thank you very much. Right, we move on then to item 8, which is Budget and Policy Committee, to consider the minutes of the meeting of the Budget and Policy Committee, which was held on Tuesday the 4th of June. Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to present these minutes as I've now been elected chairman of this committee. I hope you've all read them, because there's quite a lot of meeting minutes recorded. We had a good talk about lots of things, and there's just a couple of recommendations, 3 recommendations in fact, I want to just bring to the council. One is a recommendation that Tavistock Town Council endorse and adopt the Co-op Services Plan as a basis for the delivery of related council services for 2019-20. And the second there is that endorse and adopt the Tavistock Town Council Organisational Risk Register.
Anybody have any comments on that? Be happy to approve that. Thank you.
Okay, and the second one is a recommendation. This is a commercial community service plan that recommend that Tavistock Town Council endorse and adopt the commercial community service plan as the basis for the delivery of related council services for 2019-20 and the accompanying service risk register.
Thank you. Any questions? Are we happy that we adopt that? Yeah. Thank you.
And there is a confidential thing I think we'll bring in the next part. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now move on to item 9, Development Management and Licensing Committee to receive and consider the minutes of the meeting of the Development Management and Licensing Committee held on the 11th of June. Councillor Ward, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to present the minutes of the Development Management and Licensing Committee. Item 46, apologies for absence. 47, confirmation of minutes. 48, declarations of interest. 49, Dartmoor National Park Authority. 50, town planning issues. Could I draw to members' attention that prior to the next meeting of the DM&L, there will be a presentation on the proposed open spaces sport and recreation plan. This is open to all members. It's not restricted to members of the DM&L committee, and I would encourage you to attend.
Thank you.
Item 51, 52, 53 and 54. There were no recommendations on this occasion, Madam Mayor. I beg to move.
Thank you. If we have a seconder for those, please. Thank you. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Item 10, other items. Appointments to other outside bodies. To consider appointments to the following bodies. Firstly, Tavistock Museum Trust, second observer. I think at the annual meeting we agreed one observer to go to the Museum Trust, but there were two people who were interested in it. Mr Town Clerk, I think you've been in touch with the museum about this.
Yes, they have confirmed that they would be comfortable with there being another observer.
Right, I think Councillor Fay was the second volunteer, so that's now Councillor Ward and Councillor Fay will attend the Museum Trust as observers. So thank you to both those councillors. The second one is the Jessie Ann Alford charity. We need to appoint a third trustee. I understand Mrs Woodcock has...
She's decided not to continue.
So, is anybody interested in doing... Sorry, Councillor... Yeah. It doesn't take many meetings, does it? It's one meeting a year, I think. Councillor Mrs Ewings has volunteered. Is anybody else interested? No, can I propose Councillor Mrs Ewings then? Councillor Williamson?
I thought I volunteered.
Yes, you have.
Yes, you have. You're already on there, Councillor Williamson. Right, so I'm proposing Councillor Mrs Ewings. Can we have a seconder for that, please? Thank you. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Right, the grants panel. 9 members required to serve on the grants panel. That's fairly involved. You need to look at all the grant applications which come in the autumn. They need to be scored, and then we have one meeting to decide. So can we have some volunteers, please? I'd like to put my name forward. Thank you. Councillor Smith, Councillor Hutton, Councillor Ellis, Councillor Williamson, Councillor Mann, Councillor Squire, Councillor Smith B, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Mrs Parker. How many is that, please?
More than 9.
Oh, is it? Can we go with more than 9?
That's 10. We use half the number else.
Do we?
Yeah, because of voting, isn't it?
Okay, well, I'll take my name off that then. So that gives you 9, okay? Sure. Councillor Mrs Mann.
Madam Mayor, are we going to be doing the scoring in the similar way to last time? In which case, I think it was suggested last time that actually we could have as many as we wanted because it was weighted differently. It didn't come down to like you didn't need an odd number of people.
No, I didn't think you did. But,
no,
yeah.
it was definitely not necessary under the score sheet that was used in the last round.
At 10 o'clock?
It's a matter for members. It's not a meeting which has a formal status. It's not determinative in terms of its role. Therefore, it can be flexible in terms of what the membership is. I think it's a question of ensuring that those members who serve on it are comfortable with the amount of work involved in terms of doing the assessment. I don't know how members found it last time, but I'm going to guess that it probably took half a day to actually do the assessment in quite in a relatively constrained time period, as has been pointed out to me by the assistant to the town clerk. So the key thing is that members are comfortable with the work that's involved in it. It's not just reading the applications and coming to a view. There is an assessment which is through a pre-populated scoring system as to how you do it. How many members you have on it is I think, we picked 9 because that was what we had last year. Clearly, if it was the whole council, then you don't necessarily need a grants panel. You just have a council meeting to review it.
Yeah. I'm happy for my name not to be on it. I'll probably turn up at the meeting and I probably will have read them all, but I won't score them. Okay? And anyway, last year it was quite difficult because I did know quite a lot of people. Right, thank you. So that's 9 volunteers. That's excellent. Item B, restricted road and 30-mile-an-hour speed limit order, Butcher Park Hill. That's in your papers. To consider the above traffic order. It was received too late from Devon County Council to be considered by DMNL. Do we have any comments on that, please? Councillor Moody?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've just had a couple of comments from residents around the Butcher Park Hill area, and no doubt they will be writing to the Devon County Council by the 4th of July is the last date for comments. A couple of things was traffic calming. In spite of moving the 30-mile-an-hour limit out into the countryside, even if people just take their foot off the accelerator going down Butcher Park Hill, they can easily exceed 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour. With the pedestrian crossing at the bottom, there are concerns. Also with the narrow strip where there is no middle line. The suggestions that some residents have raised with me is a traffic calming type process of having a priority signage up the hill to stop vehicles coming down the hill quickly, and particularly at that narrow point. And the other point that someone has raised is the possibility of slowing down traffic into further down Drake Road is a mini roundabout at Glanville Road intersection, which hopefully would work similar to the Vigo Bridge roundabout. Whilst people are still driving over it, it's just enough to make people balk and slow down so they're not speeding down to the top end of Bannerwell Street and further on. So that's, but as I say, no doubt residents will be raising those concerns with Devon County. But I just thought I'd raise those tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, so this at this stage is for information. Unless we have a proposal on it, we will move on to the next item. Okay. The notice of motion, to consider a notice of motion proposed by Councillor Ms Crawford and seconded by Councillor Mrs Mann. Councillor Crawford, would you like to read the notice, please? Thank you.
Yes. My motion is, it is now clear that the world has less than 11 years to switch away from fossil fuels to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. Reducing energy use and switching to clean energy will also increase energy security, improve air quality, minimise fuel poverty, boost the local economy and provide jobs and training. It is proposed that Tavistock Town Council declares a climate emergency and commits to going carbon neutral by 2030. In declaring an emergency, we will raise the profile of the issue and help to secure future financial commitments to achieve these carbon reductions. We're asking the Council to declare a climate emergency, pledge to take actions within the Council's power to make Tavistock carbon neutral by 2030, place this issue on Council and Committee agendas to agree strategies and action plans to take into account the effect on the progress towards the carbon neutral target and increased biodiversity. Work with other local authorities, appropriate government departments and other organisations to determine, implement and deliver best practice methods. Set up a working party of interested councillors and community groups to A, identify best practices in measuring, tracking and recording carbon footprint and caring for the environment as individuals and as a community, and make further recommendations to the Council regarding actions that could be taken in support of the climate emergency.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford.
Okay.
The note at the bottom says if the Council is minded to view the motion favourably in principle and it's worthy of further consideration, it's something that we should normally take to budget and policy so that we can look into it some depth. Councillor Parker?
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, we can hardly hear you.
Oh, really?
I'm so sorry.
Sorry, I thought my voice was quite loud usually. Is that better?
That's okay.
It's very difficult because this chair is quite a long way back. I'm perched on the edge of it as it is. Sorry, so if the Council is minded to view the motion favourably and considers the motion worthy of further consideration, it's recommended that in accordance with the normal practice, it's referred to Budget and Policy Committee in order that we take the necessary due diligence and a number of recommendations might be made. So the views of the Council. Mr Town Clerk, did you wish to comment at this stage?
No. I think not beyond reiterating what you've said, Madam Mayor, which is, I mean, clearly, in any motion on policy which is brought forward through this process, if it has no merit, the motion itself falls. But if members consider that it may have merit and it's something which is worthy of considering for taking forward, it stands referred to budget and policy in order that due diligence can be undertaken and that the implications of potential courses of action can be established.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis.
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to provide some balance to this. The UK produces approximately 1% of the world's carbon emissions. If we as a nation were to go carbon neutral right now, the effect on the world would be negligible. The UK government has finally done the right thing by declaring a climate emergency. Hopefully this commitment to make a real change can be used to lobby the rest of the world. However, I don't believe the likes of China, Russia and the USA will change their policies just because Tavistock has decided to join the rest of the virtue signalling councils by declaring an emergency. With regards to the town going carbon neutral by 2030, this is much earlier than the IPCC target of 2050. We should be realistic in our approach to carbon neutrality. In short, as a council, we should not set ourselves up to fail. Currently, there's no news of funding from the government for councils to go carbon neutral. And with Devon County Council and West Devon Borough Council only just having declared a climate emergency themselves and setting aside thousands to talk about the way forward, maybe we should wait to hear the outcome of their discussions. As a council, we would have to lead from the front, spending absolutely thousands insulating all our property, roofs and walls, changing our windows, and finding a sustainable energy source to light and heat our buildings. With the upcoming Guildhall project and taking financial responsibility for the town's toilets, how much more do we increase the town's preset to finance this? I commend Councillor Crawford's proposal to set up a working party to how we can take steps to become more environmentally friendly as a town. However, if this committee was set up, then a priority would be to establish Tavistock's carbon emission baseline before attempting to go carbon neutral. Without a baseline, how can we measure the goals we're achieving and how do we not know we're carbon neutral already? Can I also suggest, before we discuss how we're going to improve the environment as a council, we get the General Manager to brief us on what we are doing already and any future plans. To summarise, I agree we can do more as a town to lessen our impact on the environment, working with groups already established within the town, as well as outside agencies. We can achieve goals such as being a plastic-free town and make it our aim to send virtually nothing to landfill. We could investigate sustainable energy sources to benefit its town and its people, such as a hydroelectric generator upon our river, to power street lights and who knows, even more. All I have said is achievable and a relatively low cost. I firmly believe there are many ways we can make an impact upon the environment as a council and as a town. However, we should be leading on this, not following other councils in empty gestures and unrealistic targets.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Councillor Mrs Mann.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Ellis. I actually think I agree with him. It sounds like we're on the same page. The reason that we've brought this motion is to get conversations like what he's talking about onto the table on a regular basis at Council. So the motion is not about being empty, it's about saying this is important enough that it needs to be addressed on all Council agendas, and when we make decisions at things like the Guildhall project, that we actually take into consideration the effects of those decisions on not just the look of the building, but also on the possibility of reducing our carbon emissions as a town. There's a lot of important things that should go into decision making in any project. Obviously, with the Guildhall, we've already kind of got to the place where we can't make a lot of those decisions, but where we could, we can have that on the agenda, and it can be part of the decision-making process. This isn't about spending thousands of pounds. It might be about being creative, by inviting people in the local community to come to us and tell us what they'd like. For instance, we have lots of new buildings going up all around us. Would people in Tavistock be interested in us negotiating with all of them to allow a solar roof panel company to come in and offer discounts that we've negotiated on a large level? With 1,200 new homes coming in, we should be able to help guide our development in that direction and work with West Devon, who's also declared a climate emergency, to do those things. There have been a lot of people working, and you're right, there are a lot of established groups that are working in this direction in the town, but they haven't gotten very far, and one of the reasons is because they're not necessarily always taken seriously. So having a climate emergency is part of being part of the solution, and it's part of being part of West Devon's climate emergency and Devon County Council's climate emergency and the national climate emergency. It puts us on the same agenda, and it makes it available to us that we can ask for help from central government for funding for things that we need to make changes for that we don't have the funding for ourselves. There is funding that is coming available on these issues, and if we want to be available, we want it to be available to us for like for instance the project that Councillor Ellis mentioned, doing a water power on the Tavy. We're going to need to be working with all those levels of government, so aligning ourselves with them by declaring a climate emergency along with them makes sense to me. I personally think that it does need to be discussed on a policy level in committee, because I think there's a lot of things that need to be figured out how that would go about, how we'd go about doing it. So I actually support what is on the agenda, which is to, support the motion to be further considered in committee at Budget and Policy.
So is that a proposal then?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. So anybody else wish to speak to it? Councillors, sorry, we're speaking to it first of all. Councillor Squire, then Councillor Moody, then Councillor Mrs Ewing.
I'd like to say I support this motion, having been the host of the climate change marches that came through Tavistock a few weeks ago. I think the subject does need discussion, as Councillor Ellis has brought up, because I don't want to lose the opportunity of a barbecue in the square due to our own policy. So it's got some very practical, although probably minute issues. I think we can still set an example by progressing this particular motion.
Thank you. Councillor Moody.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I fully support the motion as well. Maybe from what Councillor Ellis is suggesting is that it may be too prescriptive in its time scale. But that's something that the B&P, the Budget and Policies Committee, can look at. So I fully support as you know, West Devon have signed they have agreed to the climate emergency and also biodiversity emergency. which is one issue that there are two things that leapt out at me when I read this suggestion and read the other reports. Is item 11 in the Works Department report, referring to land management, suggests that our weed spraying is continuing. So that's the first thing that thought, hello, this is something we need to be thinking about the biodiversity of creating a meadow in the meadows, Tavistock meadows, and I believe that there's something going on there as well. And there was another thing which I've completely forgotten. I think that's about all I can say. I've forgotten.
Okay,
what the
thank
second
you.
point.
Councillor
Thank
Mrs Ewing, next, please.
I was just going to ask, would the General Manager, because it seems to be mainly him that this is going to give extra workload to, unfortunately, with his busy workload, but for the B&P meeting, where we can say what some of the best practices or whatever are, and what section of the meadows, you know, to look at realistically, you know, are we talking about electric vehicles, etc., you know, how feasible going down that route is for the B&P meeting. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
I've remembered what I...
Right, Councillor Moody.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me speak. The one thing that having been at West Devon for a while now, where we have a paperless society at West Devon, this is where Tavistock Town Council could save not just money, time, but we could also save a few rainforests when we've got 20 of these documents and these other documents presented every 6 weeks. So I'd like to look at the possibility of the Town Council going down the paperless or paper, not no paper, but just reducing the amount of paper that we use.
Yeah, that is available to members at the moment if they so wish. It's on the portal, isn't it? Yeah.
Pardon?
It's on the portal.
Yeah, but we're still printing it though.
Yeah, but you could tell the office that you don't need a printed copy and then they wouldn't send you one.
There are some issues with the portal as well.
Right, okay. Councillor Hutton.
I agree with the idea that we should declare a climate emergency. I certainly think that Budget and Policy should be looking at all that we've talked about tonight and more to see where we go from here. I'm just a little bit worried. If we agree with this motion, it's the back that's saying pledge to take actions within the Council's power to make Tavistock carbon neutral by 2030. If we agree to this motion, as it is at present, are we basically saying whatever it costs, however we will go carbon neutral by 2030. What I would like to suggest, can we have changed motions, is that we agree maybe a climate emergency and then refer it to Budget and Policy for discussions and then work out what we want to do and maybe then bring motions to Council. Can we do things like that? Because as it stands, I think we're committing things that we have no idea what we're funding.
Councillor Mann, would you like to come back on that, please?
Just to come back on that, my proposal was not to necessarily declare a climate emergency tonight. I think the understanding is that we are considering the motion worthy of further consideration.
Yeah.
Which means we're not going to be declaring it today. Hopefully we would declare it after we've had a policy meeting at Budget and Policy, in which case I'm assuming it will look different based around who comes and discusses that in that context and has input. And then that would be the way it would move forward, which is what I understood to be proposing.
Absolutely, and we will obviously have a lot more information before us at Budget and Policy. Councillor Crawford.
Yes, I would like to say, first of all, I agree with an awful lot of what Councillor Ellis has said. And actually, if I'd had a chance to read my notes, I would have referred to all of the good things that are going on in the town, because there's a fantastic amount that we are doing towards biodiversity and all of the environmental issues that are important to us. I don't agree that 2050 is appropriate timing. I think we need to declare it 2030. 2050 is far too far away, and I noticed that some councils, including Ashburton, have declared 2025, so we're behind the thing in that respect, but I'm not going to ask for that. I would like to say that could we call a climate emergency tonight, even if we don't take on the whole motion and refer the rest of it to Budget and Policy. I'm fine with that, but I think we should say that we adopt and recognise that there is an issue that we need to do something about.
Councillor Williamson, Councillor Ellis, Councillor Smith.
It's been an interesting and wide-ranging sharing of views. And the fact of the matter is that declaring a climate emergency is going to generate a significant amount of work. And nowhere, at no stage so far have we said anything other than it should be referred to the Budget and Policy Committee, which apparently will provide the workforce for this task. I think the workforce needs to be across the council, and somehow Budget and Policy is the funnel for that work. And if the pioneers here, the proposers of this motion, actually want to do some of the heavy lifting and achieve a baseline, as Councillor Ellis suggested, because we have no idea what our carbon emissions are. We have no idea what our consumption of single-use plastics are. There are plastic stirrers in the room. We rent land to a golf club that allows the use of plastic golf tees, and on it goes. We allow the burning of carbon on our square, and Councillor Squire mentioned foregoing a barbecue, but it's a bit more than that. The Roby Trust will have a view about whether they can or cannot burn carbon if the council says you ought to forgo that pleasure. So it is an enormous and very wide-ranging topic that we've actually rather introduced as a climate emergency, and we'll do it by 2030. I think that's over-ambitious, and lots of other councils have declared a much later time frame, and our government has too. So I think it needs to be a very considered, deliberate and costed strategy to declare a climate emergency, and what that will bring upon our council, our preset players and our workforce. Going electric would be easy. To mow the lawns with batteries rather than petrol-powered equipment would be easy, but we've got to replace I don't know how many streamers if we go that way, which are all hanging on the wall that need replacement. So there will be equipment costs for the council. It is a very, very significant thing to say that there is a climate emergency and we're going to do something about it, which is what the motion, as currently drafted, is actually saying. And I think we need to just be a bit more circumspect about declaring a climate emergency and fall in behind all the other authorities that have done so. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis, although you come to come back.
The target of carbon neutrality by 2050 has been set by the IPCC, which are the experts who actually produced all the information in this report about global warming and the rise of 1.5 degrees. They've set that target for a reason, because they believe it's achievable across the world.
They don't.
Although we should, try and better ourselves, there's being really realistic about it. I support discussing about the climate emergency at Budget and Policy, but if we do declare an emergency means we have to change right now. And that means as a council we have to change all our motor vehicles, we have to change our bulbs, we have to change our insulation, everything, right now, costing the public money. We should discuss this before going to the extreme of declaring an emergency.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith, Harry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, can you say that?
Declaring a climate emergency, in declaring it, we will follow many other councils and regional governments. But when you look at it and you read what's coming forward, many of the other areas have found that declaring the emergency is the easy part. Yeah. They've done it. Funding the changes required has proved a lot more complicated. The one thing we do know for certain, or hopefully for certain, is that the Chancellor has announced that gas heating in new homes will be banned by 2025. So, if we're lucky, new homes constructed in Tavistock before then may well not have gas central heating. We've not seen how that might play out locally, so we're really looking forward to see how that happens. Overall, the country has cut greenhouse gases by 40% since 1990. And we also need to be aware that the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy has said it's going to help local authorities to work with them once they themselves have received advice on net zero emission targets. We can do whatever's possible locally, but we cannot do it in isolation or when it's unfunded. We've seen recently, fairly recently, within the last few months, some parish-funded initiatives under the heading of a climate emergency. These initiatives, by the very words of the authorities themselves, had a modest capital outlay, but they've resulted in spiralling revenue requirements. That's what local authority, parish councils have found. And this is an aspect of the whole thing that needs to be carefully considered by budgeting policy. Whatever goes forward has to be funded, otherwise there's no point in going forward. And so we do not want to fall into the same trap as some parishes have and are now suffering the consequences from their the people that live locally.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Parker now, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Cracking, there's been some great words spoken this evening by Councillor Hutton, Councillor Williamson, Councillor Ellis, but mainly I think what resonated with me was Councillor Crawford in the last statement that she made. We're not alone if we do this. Devon County Council, the last Devon Association of Local Councils was exhorting all local councils to row in behind them and their initiatives. All the local councils that were represented there were absolutely behind that. West Devon Borough Council have gone down this road. Government has gone down this road. We will not be alone if we do this, but I think what we need to remember is that we're a town council, and it's a question of where the town council could put its efforts best to achieve what we all want to achieve, which is a sustainable town. That could involve direct action. You know, what do we do as a town council in our own property? It could involve it must involve working with West Devon and Devon County at the very least, otherwise we're duplicating effort. It should involve working with all of the local organisations that Ursula and Leslie have referred to, who are already trying to make a difference in this town. It could cover carbon neutrality, energy policy, travel modes, and travel usage. It could and should include biodiversity. There's a whole range that could be covered by those words, climate emergency. What Councillor Crawford said was, for her the important thing is declare that council emergency tonight. The rest of her motion, she said, could be the basis of a discussion, at Policy and Budget Committee. And that, I think, is something that I could row behind. So if we split this motion into two, one, declare a climate emergency, and two, I'm trying to read my own writing now, request the Policy and Budget Committee to recommend the actions regarding the actions that could be taken by the Town Council in support of the council emergency. Two simple things. Declare it now. Ask the Policy and Budget to determine what it is we should be doing. I can certainly row behind that.
Thank you. We have a proposal already on the table which has been seconded. I think we probably need to vote on that. Would you be able to read out the proposal?
That proposal is that, hang on, let's have a little look, that this matter be referred to the Budget and Policy Committee for further consideration.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's fine.
That's what Councillor
Yeah,
That's my
Councillor,
yeah,
So he's amending my proposal.
yeah.
By saying declare the council.
by declaring an emergency.
right, so Councillor Parker's amended that proposal, so we'll take, but he hasn't had a seconder for the amendment. Yeah, please, Mr Town Clerk.
I think just before we move to that, and just picking up, I think the difficulty is a lot of the discussion that we've had here is the discussion that should be taking place at Budget and Policy.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's discussion which is taking place, which is without all members having been informed of material considerations. So, for example, does this council really feel that declaring a climate emergency, which has a specific meaning, is the right way forward? Or does it feel that the Devon Climate Declaration, which is the declaration which is being signed up to by Devon County Council and the principal authorities in Devon and the Devon and Cornwall Police, is the right way to go? What are the differences between those two approaches? Does it take into account the work that the Devon and Cornwall Police Force is doing in terms of institutional carbon reduction? Does it take into account the work that is being jointly funded by Devon County Council, Exeter University and another organisation whose name escapes me, which is looking at producing a carbon reduction action plan for Devon and for public authorities in Devon? There's so much that's going on. If you're going to declare a climate emergency now, then you're tying yourself into a specific meaning and a specific course of action without actually having had an informed debate about it. Now, politically, clearly you can do that, and that is what the role of the council is. I think the question I'm asking you is, there isn't actually any point referring something to Budget and Policy for further consideration if you've made the decision about the policy and which policy outcome you want. You've created that committee in order to be able to look at and understand the implications of decisions in relation to major policy items. This is potentially the largest extraneous policy item, so obviously you deal with things like, particular projects, but the largest, if you like, community policy item that you're going to deal with. It could be as large as a neighbourhood development plan, it could be more than a neighbourhood development plan in terms of the aspirations and the expectations there. So please be very clear, if you are declaring a climate emergency tonight and then asking Budget and Policy to go away and to work up what to do about that, that is a very, very different position to asking Budget and Policy to look at the issues and the options, provide informed response and enable this council to make an informed decision down the line. It's a legitimate view, but one is committing you to a specific course of action, which is this course of action, without having regard to the other options that are available to you. The other is actually saying, let's look at all the options and work out which works best for this town council and which can best be resourced by this town council working with its partners.
Thank you. Councillor Parker?
Wise advice. Wise advice that I disagree with. There's a great precedent for the principle of saying we will make a political statement, we will take a political stance. And John Clark's perfectly right. The question as to whether we want to declare a climate emergency is one for this council. It is a political statement. The question about what that means, I hate to mention the word Brexit, which is exactly the process that we've been through, is one for the Policy and Budget Committee to advise this council on. Whether the climate emergency means working with these other groups, I think it ought to, but that's advice we need. But the principle of my amendment was to refer to the actions that could be taken by the town council. What is it that we should do to further the interests of avoiding this climate emergency? So I think it's good of the town clerk to remind us of that, but my own view is that the amendment should stand with the words declare a climate emergency.
I think Councillor Squire was first, then Councillor Mrs Ewing.
If, as the town clerk suggests, that the words climate emergency could bring upon us a whole set of expectations which are beyond our immediate understanding and control, I still think this council can acknowledge that there is a climate crisis at the moment which would remove the nomenclature which might be causing some concern, but acknowledge the fact that we are in a crisis due to the climate and that we could acknowledge that tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Ewing.
I'd like to make a couple of suggestions. One of them is that it goes to budget and policy without Councillor Parker's recommendation, but after budget and policy, Councillor Mrs Crawford is on budget and policy. Any member can attend that meeting, and it will be probably quite a lengthy debate, etc. Then after that, you've got those couple of weeks to get a refreshed item on the agenda about how to declare that the Town Council will be able to deliver on without setting us targets that maybe we can't, or the implications of costs, etc. And I think maybe just we all feel very passionately about the subject, but actually we've had a debate tonight, members have got time to reflect, and then for the budget and policy, with the information that we will have for that agenda from the officers, etc., as to what could be deliverable. I'm going to make a suggestion tonight. One councillor has got 2 cups, another councillor's got 2 plastic cups. Get rid of plastic cups. Bring your own. You know, that is a really quick win, that we just get rid of our plastic cups when they're used, go to paper cups, but as members, we take a responsibility to bring our own. You know, that's a really simple, quick win. But I do think that maybe we ought to just hold on tonight for where we are. And I'm sorry, Councillor Parker, I do disagree with you. I think that actually we should just hold on for a couple of weeks, and then Councillor Crawford's got time to work with the officers, and Councillor Mann to work with the officers to come back with something that actually is deliverable.
Thank you. Councillor Moody, then Councillor Ward.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I thank Councillor Ewings for her comments. I think that it's important. The suggestion from the Town Clerk is that if we declare an emergency or recognise that there is an emergency, there is some obligation. There isn't. It is just making a statement of intent. And that's all we're asking for tonight, is a statement of intent that we realise, we look out the window and we realise that there is something going on out there, and we should start putting our thinking caps on and start doing something about it. I.e., I go back to the printing, about the plastic cups, all the sorts of things, the areas that we can save using carbon issues, to avoid using carbon. And also, we will save money as a council by doing it. But also, going back to Councillor, what's your name again, Parker, is that we can be the driver in Tavistock to assist, and we can act as the catalyst without any responsibility. It's not going to cost money. I understand that there is this issue that you had, Councillor Ellis, that having this prescriptive date of 2030, I think removing that, but just tonight saying, let's recognise that there is an issue, and let's vote in favour of, I support Councillor Parker's motion, but it doesn't mean that we are restricted. It doesn't mean we're obliged to do anything. We don't have to spend any money. We can just start talking about what climate change is all about, and making small incremental changes in the way that we run our business, and help Tavistock to do the same, and working with our other stakeholders. Thank you.
Councillor Ward, then the Mayor, then Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to say, whilst I'm fully supportive of the principles behind this, I feel extremely uncomfortable declaring a climate emergency before I understand what the implications are for this council. There are so many things that are out with the control of this council. Our property estate is largely mid-19th century Grade 2 listed, with the various restrictions imposed upon that with regard to insulation. We have the A386 trunk road passing through the middle of our town, and on which very large vehicles and lots of smaller vehicles roll. I believe that if we accept that this motion is worthy of further consideration and is referred to B&P, that in itself indicates that we are looking at this and taking it seriously. Once we have done that, we are then in a position to decide whether or not to declare a climate emergency. I happen to believe that we will do so. But I don't see what the difference is whether we pass it at this meeting of full council or at the next. And so I find it difficult to support this amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, you can go first, then I'll sum up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to speak in favour of the amendment to my proposal. And the reason I'm going to do that is because the town clerk referenced something called the Devon
Climate Declaration, which is
Devon Climate Declaration
made by the local authorities and public bodies.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to annoy Councillor Ellis because I think virtue signalling in this particular context is worth doing. And saying that we're on board the same way everybody else has said they're on board, which is declaring a climate emergency, is important enough to me that I would get on board with voting in that direction tonight, just to have those words, so that I'm not saying that we're declaring a Devon, sorry, what was it?
Devon Climate Declaration.
That we're not declaring a Devon Climate Declaration, which doesn't really describe the same feeling at all as a climate emergency. And so I would just like to say that I think the amendment of splitting it up so that we are not actually committed to anything, because I read so many climate emergency declarations in the last couple of weeks. Most of them, many of them, are very, very bare. They don't actually specify anything. They say things like the council will take actions to improve the local environment. Okay, so they're not, you aren't committing to anything in particular when you declare a climate emergency, as far as I could tell. The better ones are worded in a similar way to this, where they have specific commitments, but I'm quite happy to let Budget and Policy discuss and everyone here have their say on what they want those commitments to be. The climate emergency itself doesn't have an accepted meaning other than, hey, it is time to say we can't wait another month. We need to declare this now. So I'm in favour of Councillor Parker's amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're... Councillor Crawford?
Can I just say that I agree that we should look at splitting the motion. I'm quite happy for it to go back to Budget and Policy to look at all of those issues that have been raised. But I do think it's important that we get behind the idea of declaring a climate emergency, or however we want to word it, so that we are out there and recognising that we do need to do something.
Okay, we'll be looking at this when we have our policy scoping day anyway. The town clerk said that the Devon Climate Change, is that the name of it, has specific obligations attached to it. So it would be difficult for us to go along those lines tonight without knowing what those obligations might or might not be. Right, so we have an amendment which we will take first.
I think just to clarify, if I may, Madam Mayor, because the proposer has accepted the amendment, I think you can treat that as being the new proposition.
Councillor Parker, then Councillor Mrs Ewing.
Just on a point of order, as I'm now the proposer of the substantive motion, do I have the right to have the last word?
I think it's fair to say that given that members only have an opportunity to speak once on a matter, and we've had a debate where members have spoken on multiple occasions on a matter, whilst it is a matter for the chairman's that's very much a matter for the chairman's discretion.
Councillor Mrs Ewing, and then I'll make a decision about Councillor Parker.
Could the town clerk read the exact wording of what we are voting for, please?
Right. Councillor Parker, do you still wish to say something?
Thank you. Yeah, I will, if it's acceptable, read the substantive motion. But I do want to make a point, which is that declaring a council emergency, a climate emergency, a climate emergency is a political statement. It's a direction that, if we agree with it, that we want this council to go in. The second part of the motion is about the way in which we move it forward, i.e., and I think everybody seems to be agreed that it should move to the Policy and Budget Committee. If we don't accept both parts of that motion, I look at things in the sense of, well, what's the opposite of declaring a council emergency, a climate emergency? Well, I can almost read the headlines. You know, council refuses to declare council emergency when all councils around us and all through the country are doing just that. Could I then just read what I believe?
Yeah. Right. I think we've got two different things here. There's one proposal to say we're going to declare a climate emergency this evening, and the other one says that's one proposal, and the other one says that we should take this idea to budget and policy for further consideration. There's an awful lot to it, and we do need to consider it further.
Madam Mayor, that is the consolidated recommendation.
But there's two aspects to it, isn't there? Because I can see some people...
It has two parts, yes.
So we'll take them as two separate proposals?
Well, may I read out what I said earlier, so that we can see what it is we'll be voting on? Right. Which is that the council, one, declares a climate emergency, and two, requests the Budget and Policy Committee to recommend the actions that could be taken by the Town Council in support of the climate emergency. They're two sides of the same coin. One is the principle, the other one is the action.
Right, so will we be having two votes on this then?
One vote. Unless you have an amendment.
Right, well, I'd like to make an amendment that we first of all consider whether or not we declare a climate emergency tonight, and then secondly, whether or not we take this motion to budget and policy. Pardon? Right, go on then.
I'd like to make an amendment to the first word that Councillor Parker has. Instead of declares, I've listened to Councillor Crawford, Councillor Mann and Councillor Parker all say the wording recognise.
No, declare.
And maybe at this stage, if you want to do that bit, then actually, you know, then we can maybe change and have another motion, because you'll have more than 10 supporters to take it forward at another meeting if you're desperate to do it tonight. But I'm still uncomfortable with just a bland statement that's got nothing behind it. And we need to be able to do the research first. And call me cautious or whatever, but I've been here a long time, and I do feel that actually caution is the best way forward. It's only waiting 6 weeks. Hopefully, you know, meteorites or whatever don't hit us in the meantime. But, you know, I just feel, can someone tell me what is the difference of waiting 6 weeks? Because I personally can't see any. So I would like to just change that word to recognises. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, did you wish to comment?
I was under the understanding, Madam Mayor, that you propose a way forward or another motion or an amendment. My feeling is not about declaring a climate emergency, but about considering what declaring a climate emergency by this council means to this council, all the aspects of it. I'm not aware of all the aspects. There is a lot of information that I require to know, A, exactly what we can do and what we can do successfully, because that's what it's all about. You need to have situations that you win. If you're going to do something, you do it properly, you do it thoroughly, and you investigate beforehand exactly how you're going to achieve that aim. Therefore, if you keep the two parts of this motion together, I don't believe that you can do it that way.
No.
Therefore, I wish to second your proposal, Madam Mayor, that the two items are taken separately.
Thank you. Right, I think we've had quite enough debate on this. So is my proposal an amendment then?
Yes,
take that one first.
That would be to separate the two items.
Okay, thank you.
So the proposal that you have before you is the amendment, and that is that the two items be taken separately rather than as a consolidated proposal. Could those who are in favour that the two items be taken separately, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That is carried.
Thank you.
So they're going to be taken separately. So the first proposal, I'm assuming that the declaration is the first, which is the first element of the proposition. So this is now the first of the two proposals, and that is that the council declares a climate emergency. Could those who are in favour of that please indicate? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Could those who are against please indicate? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Thank you.
Okay, that is lost. The second proposition then is that the Budget and Policy Committee be requested to consider the actions that the Council might appropriately take in considering the motion that is before you and make recommendations as to a way forward. Those in favour? That is carried. Is there anyone against? Thanks. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much. I think we've given that a fairly good airing this evening. We now move on to service reports. To receive for information the following service reports. Number 1 is the General Manager's report. It's been presented to you. Did anybody have any questions? Can I just make some... Can I make a comment, please, and say thank you very much to our General Manager for the way that the pannier market surround was completed, and I know there were a number of challenges with it, so thank you for all the work you put into that, Wayne. Thank you. Councillor Mrs Mann.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I put one of these on everyone's table. This is mentioned in the Town Manager's report. It's something that the Tavistock Community Garden has been working on, which is the Blue campaign, which is about rewilding small areas. It creates pollinator corridors through towns and villages, and the Town Council is supporting this with 9 locations on Town Council property. We're going to be marking those with a blue heart like this, so that the public can engage with it and learn about the programme, and I think he's mentioned it in his report that they've already agreed all of the locations. So this is the sheet. If you'd like to put it up somewhere that is visible, it tells people the actions that they might take. It's not that you have to do all of them in order to do it, but I just wanted to say thank you, and I think it's a wonderful thing that they're supporting within our local community.
Thank you. I don't have one of those. I can't see it. Councillor Parker?
I wasn't going to stand on this because I actually do agree with the principle of it. But is it now the Town Council has proposed 9 locations. One of those locations appears to be the Sensory Garden. Is it now the Town Council's... I've got to be very careful here, I appreciate, but is it the Town Council's policy to determine locations without consulting those working on it? The Central Garden hasn't been consulted on this.
Thank you. Anybody like to answer? Councillor Mann?
Sorry, Councillor Parker, we're working with Ali Sedgwick, who has a portion of the garden that is the part that is referred to. I don't think it's the entire sensory garden.
Can I...
Please, Harry.
Councillor Smith?
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between someone saying something to someone else and actually the organisation considering such a request. I can confirm what Councillor Parker has actually said. The committee running the Century Garden has not had a request to use that information. And we were talking about information earlier and who's possessing it and who owns it. The way to go forward in anything in the Century Garden is through the committee. And if it hasn't come before the committee, that information should not be used.
Thank you. Okay, I think we need to note that.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Mrs Ewing.
I'd just like to say I did send in comments and questions, but I think I'd publicly like to say about the where we've mentioned the pannier market, etc., that those tables that have been put out for people to come into the town, but to not have to pay to use those tables, that they're free. And we had previously Mrs Wickham, when she was here, she always used to say that we should have some tables for families to be able to come along with their own picnics and to be able to eat at them for no cost at all, but to be able to enjoy the surroundings of the market. I understand from the General Manager that there is going to be a couple more put in because they've proved very popular. The other thing I'd like to say is about those barrows and the planters. It has made the market so much more welcoming to go into, and I think the team need to be thanked for their efforts when he's busy reading.
Thank you. Right, any more comments on the General Manager's report? Move on then to the Works Department report. Noted. Any questions, comments? No. Town Hall and Butchers Hall report. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, it's just I just want to sort of confirm what we're talking about. There's been various comments about till training in the Town Hall. In the auditor's report, I think it talks about till training in various. It came to the Markets Committee about till training. Are we talking about internal training, or there was a point about external training made before? Is it internal training or external training that's taken place?
Internal training's already happened. We're looking for an external provider.
Okay.
So yes, we're talking about external training.
Right, any more questions on the Town Hall and Butchers Hall Manager's report? Thank you. Councillor Mrs Ewing. Pannier Market. Noted.
Noted.
Yeah, thank you. Moving then to item 12, finance and other matters, to receive for information the following reports. Report of the Assistant to the Town Clerk. If members could please note the change of date for the civic service. That's now on the 29th of September. I think all the register of interest now have been been submitted. Can I just make some comment about the activity log? This is pretty impressive, the number of people who are going on training courses, so well done to everybody who's putting their names forward for that. Hasn't always been like it. Thank you.
I promise this is my last but one interjection. Just on the report of the tour of the Guildhall, I was there.
Yeah, you were indeed, Councillor Parker. Right, thank you. Okay, right, now we'll move on to the Devon County Council report. We have had a report which was submitted with the papers that was sent out to us, so we will have plenty of time to read it. I think Councillor Sellis is still at the back of the room. Did anybody have any questions for her? Thank you.
It's not from your report, Councillor Sellis, but the recent diversions with Yelverton and Plymouth, a lot of the signs are still in Tavistock saying diversions. Could you just give the Highways Department a little knock on the door and ask them to pick them up, please?
Thank you.
Yeah, because one of them's been run over at the end of Plymouth Road by Pixham Roundabout.
Thank you. Councillor Parker?
It is, again, it's on one of the papers. This is the prohibition of through traffic and parking that Councillor Sellis has kindly prepared for Bedford Square. Can I ask why, for a piece of work that clearly is going to take one day, the order is for 18 months? Is that normal practice?
Yeah, they usually do give a very long time span for it, so...
Thank you.
So if I may,
Councillor Parker, that's because something might crop up, an emergency or something like that, so you're not that specific, but it's within that time. I asked the same question many, many years ago. No.
Okay, right.
Madam Mayor, I did send a flyer out about the political speed dating as well, and I'd just like to thank the councillors that have responded. Has everybody received that flyer?
Indeed, we have. Thank you. Sadly, it's the day that I work, so I'm afraid I won't be able to go there. Make it not a Monday or a Wednesday, please. Councillor Sellis, 1 year. Okay, right. Any other questions from to the Devon County Councillor? No. Thank you very much for your report, Councillor Sellis. Move on then to West Devon Borough Councillor report. Councillor Hipsey has provided a report which was informative and useful, I felt, so thank you to him for that. Any questions, comments? Councillor Smith, could you turn your microphone off, please? Sorry. D, a police report. I think we have a police report before us. I did see Kevin Williams in town the other day. He did say he'd hoped to turn up tonight, but obviously he's quite... other priorities have come up. I think Councillor... sorry, stop that. This is probably the data that's going to be taken to Southern Links in a couple of weeks' time. So I think we can note that. Could we just put in the minutes? I've had a comment from... I was contacted by Councillor Lewis this afternoon who said there are still issues down at Crowndale. Coming towards the end of term and after exams, there have been a number of fires by the Crowndale football pitch, broken bottles, abandoned cans. I have written to the police this afternoon about that, and hopefully they'll... Last time I contacted them, they did send down extra patrols to that area, so that was quite useful. So, Councillor Mrs Ewing.
Can I just say on this report that Councillor Ward and myself attended the Community Safety Forum. I can't think if there was anyone else from here, was there? Councillor Moody, oh yes. And it was a really interesting afternoon. I think very intense presentations were made, and literally within those 3 hours it was just bang, 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 bang. Really, really intensive. With some very serious issues going on with regard to safeguarding and drugs, particularly in this town. In Oakhampton, it's almost, well, safeguarding and modern slavery, I think they were sort of looking at in Oakhampton. So there's a lot going on with the police. I will bring some of the presentations in that we received from some of the groups in writing that we were given as a folder, so I could leave them with the assistant to the town clerk so that they can be placed on the table at the back or whatever. I'll bring mine in. But it was very, very interesting. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Thank you. Okay, item E, Tavistock Bid Company minutes of the meeting. Fairly comprehensive notes of that meeting. Councillor Williamson was there as our representative. Any questions, comments? Okay, noted. Item F, Town Hall and Markets Consultative Group, notes of the meeting. Okay, Councillor Mrs Ewing.
I did send a question in about item 6C, and I thought the General Manager was going to say something. I've spoken to him because item doesn't make any sense. The event is going to take place because if you look at it, it says August 19 and then saying it was, and we haven't got there yet, so I was a bit confused as to what was happening, but he says it is taking place.
Okay, thank you very much. That just needs to be amended when we come to the minutes. Okay.
He says it was held. I know, it's got all the past tenses.
Those meetings are now going to be brought forward, as you probably says in the minutes actually, to 5:30, so that traders find it easier to attend, so that will be quite useful and helpful. I think so, yeah. Okay, G, project update to receive any oral update in connection with Townscape Heritage Initiative. Mr Town Clerk, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have any updates either in connection with that one or the Guildhall Gateway Centre.
Right, thank you. H, to receive any update from or questions... Oh, sorry, Councillor Williamson?
It is on the item you're just reading off.
Oh, right, okay. Well done. Any update from or questions to council representatives serving on other bodies outside in connection with the work of those bodies? Councillor Williamson.
As some members may know, I was nominated to serve on the Oak Rail Forum and attended my first meeting earlier this month. Previously, Councillor Johnson served on that committee. I made notes at the meeting. I can share those. They're not particularly, what would I say? They're getting there with the railway, but of course there are lots of things on government's mind which are getting in the way of making decisions about investments in transport infrastructure. However, as part of my reading into this, I found a very interesting report on the A386 corridor, and Devon County Council have conducted a traffic analysis including all sorts of assessments of flow times and so forth, which is quite a fascinating document because it proposes some improvements to the A386. And if members want, I'll try and find the reference and I can pass it to the clerk. But it gives a very interesting analysis of the current situation with the A386, the travel to work times and so forth, and what might be done to improve them.
Thank you. I think that would be quite useful. Thank you. Councillor Mrs Ewing.
Is that the same document I mentioned that says there's going to be no train?
You circulated that, didn't you?
I circulated that, yeah.
I can't remember.
Or is that the same document?
Well, there probably won't be a train, but but the work done on the A386 is perhaps the offset, and maybe you're onto something about spending the money, the community, whatever it is, Section 106 money somewhere else.
Right, thank you. Does anybody else have an update? Anybody been to any other meetings? Right. Feedback from members following their attendance in any training sessions. It's your opportunity to say anything about any training. No? Councillor Benning?
Yeah, well, I'm on Tuesday night the other day, and it's to do with the 30th guide. When they asked me on one, really was going to do that.
Right, I'm on that tomorrow with Councillor Smith. Thank you. Excellent. Right, item 13, to receive such communications or reports as may be submitted by the Town Mayor. I have three things to tell you or remind you. First of all, the policy scoping evening, which is on the 9th of July at 6:30. Please, as many people as possible, attend that, because that will be when we will sort out what the Council's priorities for the future might be. B, the Open Spaces Sport and Recreation Plan will be looked at and discussed at 6:15 at the Development Management and Licensing meeting on the 2nd of July. Everybody's welcome to attend that. And thirdly, I think this was circulated by the Assistant to the Town Clerk. We've had a letter from the Devon and Somerset Fire Service. They've offered to come to the Town Council to discuss their proposals. There's proposals to change the provision of fire services, and Tavistock is affected. We're going to lose part of the cover. I was asked to provide a quote for the Tavistock Times at the end of last week. I looked into it in quite some detail. I think it would be useful for them to come and tell us what their proposals are, because there is a consultation period which will open up next month, and I think it's a 12-week consultation period. And I think, you know, if there's going to be changes, and we've got lots of new houses coming to the town, we need to be having some input into what we think. So is it your wish that we should invite them to come? Yeah. Thank you very much. Urgent matters brought forward at the discretion of the town. May I have none, Mr. Town Clerk? No. Sorry, Councillor Ellis.
Apologies, Madam Mayor. With the art exhibition tomorrow, are we meeting as one and going en masse as a council, or is it just from 1400?
I think you can go as and when you wish, because actually Councillor Smith and I are in training in Oakhampton tomorrow, so I won't be getting there till later on in the afternoon.
Okay,
so.
thank you.
Thank you. Right, exclusion of press and public. Can I propose we move into part 2, please? Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor.
I'm just checking the Wayne's turned off.
You off, Wayne? You all right, man?